Hey everybody, Michael Snyder here, Pacific Northwest Weather Watch. Today is December 22nd, and right now we are looking at the infrared satellite imagery here. You can see North America, BC, Washington, Oregon here. Look at all this Pacific moisture starting to run into this very cold air mass across North America and the Pacific Northwest. You don't have to be a meteorologist to tell you that we're going to have some issues when this occurs. Some areas are going to start off with snowfall, then transition to freezing rain here. We'll take a look at that coming up here, and we'll take a look at what kind of totals we can expect. But a pretty dynamic situation unfolding in front of us as we speak. Let's just jump right into things here. Here is the windy map. You can see the temperatures across the Puget Sound into the teens, even some single digits as you go a little bit further northward towards southwest BC. But a lot of teens out there in eastern Washington, below zero, not uncommon. Very cold through eastern Oregon as well. The freezing level has gone all the way down to the surface, down towards Eugene, even south of Eugene there. Some of the Oregon coast is below freezing as well. And I'm showing you here the Doppler radar. As you can see, the precipitation starting to move in. A lot of this is probably initially virga here, so it takes a while to saturate the entire column of the atmosphere and start bringing that precipitation down to the surface there. But it'll eventually do that as we go on in through today and on towards tonight. Now, taking a look here, this is what virga is here. You can imagine this precipitation evaporating in the atmosphere. Does not reach the surface there, but eventually, once enough of it falls, it saturates the entire column here, and it reaches the surface and is no longer considered virga here. Sometimes you'll see this in the atmosphere with these clouds with the wispy streamers here, and you can kind of tell it's evaporating before it hits the ground. That's what's known as virga. So taking a look here, this is for National Weather Service Seattle, talking about the freezing rain potential coming up there. Potentially dynamic situation here. Memorable storm, maybe, depending on how things unfold. But if we end up getting 12 hours plus of freezing rain here for some of the areas, Seattle, Portland, into southwest Washington, it's going to be one that you're going to remember here because it can severely damage trees and it can cause power outages and cause very slick roads and almost impassable travel conditions. This is what's going on with freezing rain here. So you can see this warm tongue above the surface. There are sub-freezing temperatures at the surface here. It falls through that, freezes on pretty much any single surface there is. Rain, of course, is when you go back above freezing at the surface. Sleet, warm tongue aloft, then you get some refreezing in the atmosphere, some ice pellets or some sleet is what's known, and it bounces around a bit more and doesn't cling to everything like freezing rain does, and snows when you keep things above freezing the entire column. Now, taking a look here, this is the European. Let's look at some timing here, folks. This is now about this afternoon, about 4 p.m., you can see this ice starting to move up the Willamette Valley towards the Puget Sound. Coastal range here as well. By the time we get to Friday morning, you can see much of the Willamette Valley and the Puget Sound, Seattle South is dealing with some light to occasional moderate freezing rain here. And you see this continue its march northward across the area. And moderate rain will shut down major airports here, folks. So I would have be lenient about what's coming tomorrow if you are traveling out there. So you can see this move all the way up north, but watch what happens Saturday morning. You can still see some of this freezing rain hanging on for the Willamette Valley as you go into Saturday morning. Some of the gorge here as well, some of the passes and the Cascades also, as we tend to get an easterly flow and low-level sub-freezing air here across Snoqualmie Pass. The ice can really pile up there. And then you can see eastern Washington and portions of eastern Oregon continue this freezing rain, especially through the gorge and through the Columbia Basin here, where some cold air is going to be trapped here as we go on in through Christmas Eve potentially here. But by Christmas morning, it looks like most of us are going to warm up across the region and the impactful precipitation will be out of here. So we'll calm down a bit on Christmas, but Christmas Eve could be pretty nasty there across eastern Washington, Oregon, up through BC. It's probably going to be snow once you get into northeast Washington up towards BC there. Now, taking a look here, accumulated freezing rain in inches according to last night's run on the European. Look at the accumulation start all the way up through the Willamette Valley towards the Puget Sound here. And even a tenth of an inch can cause problems, folks. And if we extend this freezing rain potential even a little bit here. You don't want to add up any more freezing rain than what's being shown here in the models, because then you quickly start to you increase the damage to the infrastructure in the trees and just becomes completely impassable. Even a small layer of ice, a very thin layer of ice, can be very difficult to travel on. So I would not advise traveling during the day Friday, folks. You can see these totals really build up. We go on into Christmas Eve, and you can see the accumulations start through eastern Washington, where it's even colder. So, it's going to be a tough warm up here as you go through eastern Washington on Christmas Eve into Christmas morning. Could be a mess out there. And you can see some of the huge totals through the gorge down there, Oregon-Washington border, and potentially into the passes here where that east flow may remain a bit longer here and some of that cold air gets trapped. And we have to be cautious here as well because there could be a freezing rain event across southwest BC, Bellingham areas, especially back up in the valleys here. We don't know how this is going to unfold just yet, but the models haven't been showing too much precipitation up there in the form of freezing rain. More of a snow event, actually, the further north you go into Skagit and Whatcom counties. So now taking a look at that, total snow in Kuchera. Now, when this starts to fall, it's going to be pretty cold, so it's going to coat everything right away. So even in Seattle, a tenth of an inch of snowfall is going to really just coat everything. It's going to look kind of dramatic at first. And as you go up towards Everett, you start to get maybe towards an inch. And then you can see once you get up towards Whatcom County here, you're looking at 2+ inches. Another pretty dynamic snowfall for eastern BC there, and maybe even clipping Victoria, Vancouver. Nice snowfall amounts. Goes without saying, big snowfall amounts across the mountains too. But then there's that freezing rain threat down through the lower passes here. So heads up for that. And as we go on into Christmas here, you can see the European actually showing a little bit of snowfall before that changes over to freezing rain there across the Columbia River Basin here, portions of eastern Oregon. Look at Spokane and Pullman getting another nice shot of snowfall. Northeast Oregon as well. Idaho, Montana, another very impactful winter storm rolling our way, folks. This is winter weather summary here. You can see SeaTac getting up towards 0.4 of an inch of freezing rain. This is going to be pretty impactful. And if I was flying out on Friday, I might not even do it because this will shut down the airport and there's nothing any airline can do about it if you're getting moderate freezing rain. Then you can see we eventually warm up above freezing here as we go on in through the afternoon on Friday. Now taking a look at Snoqualmie Pass here, you can see that some of the models were showing up over an inch of accumulation here. This is showing up about maybe 0.7 of an inch could really bring down some trees up there and be pretty impactful. So you got to watch out there. But also this starts to snow first for Snoqualmie Pass. So travel conditions are going to be just downright crazy across some of the passes coming up here on the day Friday as well. Portland, you can see up towards 0.4 of an inch of freezing rain as well. This is the Cascade Locks. Look at this. Back in the gorge here, a little bit more. The further you go east, the bigger the ice totals are possible here. Over an inch of ice on everything. Pretty damaging out there. Same thing with Bonneville out there in the Dalles through the gorge. This is Spokane. You can see more of a snow event here. Maybe a brief transition to freezing rain, but more of just kind of a glaze layer shown there. This is the GFS. Let's see what it has to show about accumulated freezing rain here. You can see pretty good amounts up through Seattle and even kind of highlighting that potential up towards Bellingham and Vancouver as we transition over there. And you can see the highlight again for the west slopes of the Cascades and the lower passes there. I think it's way underdoing some of the freezing rain that's going to occur down towards Portland as well. Now, if we go on into what is this? This is showing that cold air hanging around, and then it really brings in some freezing rain as you go through Christmas night here for eastern Washington as well, but not as big of a deal here according to the GFS versus the European across the Columbia Basin as far as freezing rain. So take a pick on which model you believe there, but it does show that little glaze here coming across the area, but might be more of a snow event for some of the areas here if you believe the GFS. Now let's take a look at what it calls for snowfall wise. You can see pretty good agreement there with the European, just about 1/10 of an inch, but it will cover everything initially across the Seattle area here. And then you can see the further you go north, the more this becomes a snow event across eastern Vancouver Island, southwest BC. Look at this. Vancouver could be pushing 6+ inches here. Bellingham 3-4 inches as well. And it's showing that snowfall potential there for the Columbia Basin here as you go on in through Friday night into Saturday morning there. Big mountain snows, eastern Oregon as well, northeast Oregon, Pullman, Spokane, Idaho Panhandle. Big winter storm coming in here, folks. This is the accumulated freezing rain according to the Canadian. I wanted to show you what this shows. It shows more for Portland, less for Seattle here, but still highlighting that potential up through the northwest interior as well. And the west slopes of the Cascades, also southwest Washington, coastal range here where this cold air gets trapped. This could be a pretty dynamic event. Canadian not showing much in the way of freezing rain here for eastern Washington, though. So, but look at this for the gorge. I mean, some ridiculous totals up there. Over 2 inches of ice on some of the places out there across the gorge as you go east Portland on I-84. So heads up for that, folks. This is the gem Canadian. You can see Seattle, 3/10 of an inch would be kind of impactful all the way down towards Tacoma and maybe even skirting Olympia there as well. But look as you go north of Everett, potential big snowfall totals if you believe the Canadian. Seems to be a bit of an outlier right now, but it does show that snowfall potential for eastern Washington as well. But that 3/10 of an inch across Seattle would be pretty dynamic, as it would all fall as snow and would stick immediately. Now, here's what's called the ice accumulation index here, and you can kind of see the damage, impact, and descriptions. I'll zoom in a little bit more. You can see some isolated or localized utility outages possible. We're probably looking at least a nice damage index of 1 here, with potential of 2 and even 3 for some areas. So you can see widespread utility outages with damage to main feeder lines and equipment expected. Tree limb damage is excessive. Outages may last from 3 to 5 days. The good thing is we're going to warm up pretty quick, so we're not going to keep the ice on everything for 24 plus hours. We're going to get back up towards the upper 30s and low 40s across a lot of the area. The problem is back in the gorge and some places down towards Portland could really get up towards this 3 level here, but Seattle could be in this level 2 here with, numerous utility interruptions expected. Now, taking a look at the sounding here, this is for Portland. I want to scroll ahead in here and show you what's going on. So if you look closely here, the 0 line is the freezing line. And you can see how the surface of Portland is well below freezing, but this warm tongue aloft comes in, bringing that rain aloft, and it falls through the sub-freezing layer and kind of hangs out for a bit here. I'm scrolling through. These are 3-hour chunks that we're going through here. So this is an extended freezing rain event potentially for Portland on into late Friday night, shown there. And if you look closely here, you can see the winds aloft are out of the southwest, but at the surface, they're through the gorge out of the east. They're kind of reinforcing that lower level sub-freezing layer of air. Now taking a look here at another visual diagram here, you can see this cold air hanging out here across the area all the way up towards Friday afternoon, according to this. But you can see this warm tongue here. This is a pretty prolonged event. Could be 24 hours for Portland there. This is for Salem down further south. You can see that sub-freezing layer hangs out for a while. So when that precipitation starts, it looks like it starts to turn over sometime in the late morning on Friday for Salem. Olympia, same thing here. You see that tongue of sub-freezing air with that warmer air aloft all the way into Friday morning. Seattle, same thing there, probably turning over about noon, maybe a little bit later. This cold air can be very stubborn as well. I need to point that out, because cold air is dense and it sits there, and models tend to overdo the scouring of this cold air as we try to transition over. So I wouldn't be surprised if this lasts 3, 4, 5 hours longer than some of what the models are saying. This is Plainfield, Snohomish County. You can see that tongue there as well. So you can't rule out some freezing rain the further you go north, even though there will be some rain shadowing around the Whidbey Island area out towards Everett as well, off the northeast portion of the Olympic Mountains there. Pellingham, you can see that tongue doesn't exist quite as much, but they stay much colder for longer here, and that's that snow threat the further north you go. Now, this is off into the Washington coast here, and you can see that tongue for Hoquiam out there as well, so don't sleep on this across southwest Washington, out all the way out towards the coastline as well. Tillamook, look at this. You can see that narrow, shallow layer of freezing air, but that's all it takes to start to accumulate ice on the surfaces out there. This is all the way out on the Oregon coast, Tillamook out there. And Astoria as well shows that sub-freezing layer hanging on, probably on in through tomorrow night, maybe on into early Friday morning, depending on how fast things scour out. This is Spokane, much less, maybe just a glaze here, as it stays pretty cold all the way in through Christmas Eve towards noon for Spokane. Boise, maybe a little bit of a glaze there as well, depending on how much precipitation can get down there. Boise is usually pretty shadowed from a lot of these precipitation events. Now let's take a look at the extended forecast as well. I've been getting a lot of questions on this, on what's coming up here. So you can see the system really bringing the cold front down across the lower 48 here on both the GFS on the right and the European on the left. Then you can see the next system, just a weak impulse there, but it's enough to bring precipitation over the cold air in place here across Pacific Northwest. And then you can see the Gulf of Alaska trough really gets cooking here, folks, on both the GFS and the European. Pretty good agreement there. And there's some windstorm potential showing up here. And as we go on into later on into next week, we're at the end of December now, and you can kind of see these systems just blasting through on both the European and the GFS. So we're getting moderate confidence here that we're going to remain pretty active as we go on into the new year coming up here. So we're just kind of changing gears from cold to warm and wet and possibly windy here across Pacific Northwest. I want to show you what the European last night was showing here, as I've been doing a little fantasy windstorm hunting, and some of it is looking like it might be a possibility. But you see these systems diving into British Columbia here, and big low swings by there, and it's got some of these lobes off the south side of it here, and these can cause some windstorms. And look at this monster storm approaching Haida Gwaii here in Vancouver Island, and kind of moving into western BC, just continuously bombarding the Pacific Northwest with storm systems here as we go on to the new year. But one of these spin ups here on the south side of a big low, in this example here, when this spins in here, one of these systems down here can really cast a powerful windstorm across Pacific Northwest. We're watching these as they come in here, and then you can see this monster storm come in here with a pretty powerful gradient on its own here across Pacific Northwest. This is on in through next week. So we'll watch these systems one by one. Still fantasy right now, any given solution, but eyes are looking into the future a little bit here. This is Quileute last night as well. You can see some high winds coming up here, potentially on in through early next week. And this is kind of new here too. You can see there's some gusts here over 50 miles per hour, and more than a few ensembles here showing up on the European, and there's plenty of gusts over 40 miles per hour too. So maybe this will start to trend a little bit windier here. That's what we're watching here across the Pacific Northwest as the pattern changes. But we still have a lot to go through before we get there, folks. But really, let's take a look at the precipitation coming up here. So you can see it's not that heavy, but it doesn't take that much to really cause these freezing rain, problems here. You can see Seattle and the European here calling for 38/100ths of an inch, which would fall as freezing rain. So you're talking about 4/10ths of an inch of freezing rain. Gets really disruptive really fast, starts to break trees and power lines and cause all kinds of issues here. But then we start to warm up, and then you can see the Pacific system start to return here, and some big rainmakers are going to be headed our way in potential windstorm activity. This only goes out 90 hours here, so this goes through Christmas Eve nighttime. But you can see the precipitation out off the coastline headed our way as well. And here's a look at the temperature here. You can see Bellingham very cold this morning, and then the quick warm up coming here. And hopefully we don't go right into flooding here, because you can start to go into sort of urban stream flooding here if you have snow, especially, around, and you start to warm things up and rain is falling. It can channel water into homes and whatnot. So hopefully we don't warm up that quick, but you can see these pretty warm temperatures coming on in through the end of the year. Portland, same thing here. The transition occurring on the day Friday. Spokane, you can see the transition occurring mainly on the day Saturday here as we start to warm up as we go into Christmas a bit here. We backed off the temperatures a little bit here on the overnight lows here too. Now, taking a look here, this is always a good thing to have in your car no matter what across Pacific Northwest, even in the winter. So, pay attention to what the National Weather Service is saying. Some of these things can really help you out if you get stuck going across the passes or just generally driving around the area when these winter storms are impacting the region. Now, let's take a look at the extended here too. You can see experimental products show a slight risk of heavy precipitation coming up here through the end of December on into the early portion of January. Risk of high winds, check it out, moderate. They can see the windstorm potential coming up here too. This is on through the end of November towards January, but we have potential before this as well. So this is just an extended look at things right now. Don't let your guard down. Risk of heavy snow is going to exist. This really exists for much of the entire winter here across the Pacific Northwest for the Cascades, but you can see that for the Intermountain West as well, and even down for the Sierra Nevada here as we go on in through the new year. And if you guys didn't see this was issued a few days ago, but it does have the seasonal temperature outlook for January, February, March, and you can see the Pacific Northwest generally supposed to be below average temperatures and above average precipitation here as we go on in through March and the early spring portion. So anyway, yeah, I'll do another video tonight, or I'm going to do a live stream, or I will be out documenting the storm here. So you'll hear again from me as we go on in through tonight at some point here. I work until about 9 p.m. So expect it after 9 p.m. If you guys want to stop by for a live stream, or, maybe I'll do another actual forecast video here, depending on how things look as far as the freezing rain potential here across Pacific Northwest. So these are pretty rare. The last big one was 2012. The one before that was 1996. Much more common for areas down towards Portland or places where you have that east wind component. Maybe some of the west slopes of the Cascades. They get freezing rain a little bit more often. So it is pretty rare across the Puget Sound to get this setup. And the freezing air goes all the way out to the coastline. So there could be some icing all the way out to the coast, as we talked about there. So anyway, join me again tonight. We'll do a live stream, or I will do another straight up briefing here, and it'll be after about 9 p.m. tonight. And otherwise, watch the National Weather Service, watch my Twitter feed here, and we'll be updating during the day, and we'll see what transpires during the day today. Thanks all my new members and subscribers. You guys make this channel possible, and I will talk to you guys tonight.